There is a road in the mountains of Tennessee and North Carolina that curves 318 times in 11 miles. Locals call it the Tail of the Dragon. Riders call it a rite of passage. But the people in these stories, they call it something else. They call it the place where things stopped making sense. Some of them drove it during the day, wide awake, coffee in hand, thinking they knew exactly what they were doing. Others came through at night, half blind in the fog, following a GPS that had no idea what it was sending them into. A few of them still aren't sure what they experienced out there. They just know something happened on Route 129 that they can't explain, and that the memory of it still wakes them up at 2 in the morning, staring at a ceiling that feels too close. These are their stories, 25 of them, and they start with the most disturbing one. Story 1. I've been driving long haul for 11 years. My name is Derek Calloway. I'm 43 years old. I've put somewhere north of 2 million miles on various trucks across this country. I've driven through ice storms in Montana, flash floods in Texas, whiteout blizzards in the Dakotas. I am not a man who frightens easily. I don't say that to sound tough. I say it so you understand what it means when I tell you that what happened on Route 129 in October of last year made me pull over and sit shaking in my cab for 40 minutes before I could move again. I was running a partial load from Knoxville down to Bryson City. Not a big haul. Fabricated metal parts, nothing sensitive. Dispatch had suggested I take the highway south and loop around, but I'd driven 129 before, just not in the dark. And I figured the load was light enough and the rig small enough to manage those curves. It was a mid-size flatbed, nothing like the behemoths I normally pilot. I told myself it'd be fine. I left Knoxville around 9 in the evening. By 10:15, I was approaching the Dragon from the north. The temperature had dropped fast. There was fog collecting in the valleys, the kind that sits low and dense and catches your headlights and throws them back at you. I slowed to what felt like a reasonable speed for the curves and started working my way south. For the first 20 minutes, everything was ordinary. The road did what mountain roads do: curved, climbed, switchbacked, plunged. My mirrors showed nothing behind me. My headlights showed nothing ahead except the next curve and the reflective posts along the guardrails. Then I noticed the truck. It appeared in my driver's side mirror somewhere around the 3rd mile. A white box truck. Not a semi, something smaller, maybe a 20-foot rental style. No markings I could make out. Running its lights normally. I didn't think anything of it. Another vehicle on the road. Fine. I took 4 or 5 curves. The road did its thing. I watched the white truck in my mirror, and it kept pace with me. Stayed back a reasonable distance, nothing aggressive, normal. Then I came around a long right-hander, and there it was again, ahead of me. I blinked. I actually blinked, like my brain thought it was seeing a visual glitch. The same white box truck was now in front of me, maybe 200 yards ahead, moving at roughly the same speed I was. I'd never passed it. I'd never seen it swing around me. It had just gone from behind me to in front of me. I told myself there had to be a second white truck. That was the only logical explanation. I'd been watching one in my mirror, and now I was looking at a different one ahead. Simple. I kept driving. The truck ahead moved with the road, smooth and steady, and I followed it through another mile of curves. And then my mirror caught it again. Behind me. White box truck. Same approximate size, no markings, now behind me again. Both of my hands went tighter on the wheel. I did a slow, deliberate scan. Mirror, windshield, mirror. Truck behind me, empty road ahead. I pushed on. 4 more curves, and there it was ahead of me again. That's when things started getting weird, not just confusing, but wrong. The kind of wrong that lives in your stomach. I'm not a superstitious man. I believe in road physics and driver fatigue and mechanical failures. I started running through the logical explanations. Two identical trucks. A truck that had somehow passed me without me noticing. A trick of the fog on my mirrors. None of them held up. Because I was watching carefully now, obsessively carefully. I kept my eyes moving between my mirrors and the road ahead like a man watching a card trick, determined to spot the sleight of hand. No passes, no turnoffs. The road had no exits for miles at this stretch. And yet, after 3 more miles of careful observation, I watched the truck disappear from my rear view. Just gone, mid-curve, like it had stopped or turned off its lights. And 30 seconds later, there it was, ahead of me. I slowed down hard. I pulled my speed back to 15 miles per hour, slow enough that a walking person could have matched my pace. The truck ahead maintained its distance, as if it were a reflection. I sped back up. The truck ahead sped up. My heart was hammering. I'm a trucker. We don't panic. Whew, I was panicking. I got on my CB. Static. I tried my cell phone. 1 bar, then none. I came around a long left sweeping curve, and there was a small pull-off area. Nothing more than a gravel apron wide enough for maybe 2 vehicles. I whipped into it and killed my lights. Darkness. Silence except for my engine and the sound of my own breathing. I sat in the dark for what felt like a long time, but was probably about 2 minutes. No vehicle passed me. Not one. Whatever had been in front of me and behind me was not on that road anymore. Or it had also stopped. The idea of the second option made the hair on my arms stand up. I sat for maybe another 3 minutes. Then I turned my lights back on and pulled slowly back onto the road. I drove the remaining 5 miles of the Dragon at 10 miles per hour, watching every mirror, jumping at every shadow. Nothing appeared. No truck ahead, no truck behind. I made it to Bryson City at midnight. I sat in a gas station parking lot under fluorescent lights and drank 2 bad coffees and tried to think it through logically. I've almost convinced myself it was 2 trucks. Almost. But here's the thing I haven't been able to shake. The thing I keep coming back to at 2 in the morning. When I was parked in that pull-off with my lights off, I had my window cracked. Just an inch or 2, the way I always do so I don't fall asleep on late runs. And in the silence, while I was sitting there waiting, I heard an engine. Close. Idling. Not moving, not passing. Idling. Like something was parked just outside the reach of where my headlights would have shone, waiting to see what I would do. I never turned my lights toward the sound. I've thought about that a lot since. I'm not sure if I'm glad I didn't, or if not knowing is worse. That road still bothers me to this day. I haven't taken 129 since. I don't plan to. Story 2. My name is Cassandra Webb. I'm 28. I work in marketing, and I am, or I was, the kind of person who trusts her GPS without question. I had driven from Charlotte to spend a weekend at a friend's cabin near Fontana Lake. Easy trip. The GPS took me down through Asheville, across to Robbinsville, and then, I'm still not sure exactly why, it routed me onto a road that it identified as a shortcut. The display showed it as a thin gray line, cutting through what looked like national forest. It said it would save me 17 minutes. I turned onto it. The pavement was real at first, cracked, narrow, but paved. The trees closed in immediately on both sides, the kind of dense Appalachian forest that blocks out the sky entirely even in full daylight. It was late afternoon, around 5, and the light was already thin and orange between the branches. About 2 miles in, the pavement ended. Gravel. I told myself it was fine. My car was a small SUV, nothing serious, but it could handle gravel. The GPS kept giving me calm, pleasant directions. Continue on current road for 4.2 miles. Sure, fine. Around mile 3, the gravel got bad. Deep ruts. I started going slower. The GPS remained serenely confident. Then I noticed something disturbing. The road was narrowing. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, like the forest was slowly inhaling. I kept checking my side mirrors and seeing branches closer each time. By mile 3.5, I had exactly 1 lane's width to work with, and I could hear brush scraping the underside of my car. I stopped and tried to turn around. I spent about 5 minutes doing a 15-point turn on a road that was now barely wider than my vehicle, edging forward and backward while the trees pressed in and my tires spun slightly on the loose gravel. I got turned around. I started heading back. The GPS recalculated. It said, "Turn right in 200 feet." I looked ahead. There was no right turn. There was only the narrow gravel road going back the way I came. I ignored the GPS. I kept driving. The GPS said, "Recalculating," then, "Turn right in 500 feet." I looked up. Still no turn, just forest. "Turn right now." I was going about 8 miles per hour on loose gravel in a narrowing forest road, and my GPS was telling me to turn into a wall of trees. I looked at the screen. The blue arrow was pointing me directly off the road to the right, into what the map displayed as nothing. No road, no path, just blank space. I stopped the car. I sat there for a moment. Through my windshield, in the failing light, I could see maybe 30 feet of gravel road ahead before the forest bent and blocked the view. To my right, what the GPS was telling me was a turn, was a wall of forest, dense, dark, no gap, no path. I picked up my phone to call my friend. No signal. The GPS said, "When possible, make a legal U-turn." I put the car in drive and started moving. I was maybe a mile from the paved section. I just needed to get back to the main road. That's when the figure appeared in my headlights. He was standing in the middle of the road. A man, heavy-set, wearing work clothes, canvas pants, a dark jacket. He had his hands in his pockets. He was not moving toward me or away from me. He was just standing there, looking at my car. I braked. I stopped about 40 feet from him. We looked at each other through my windshield. His face was in partial shadow from the trees, but I could see he was older, maybe late 50s or 60s, and that he was very still. My window was up. My doors were locked. I put my hand on the door lock button anyway, making sure. He raised one hand, a slow, deliberate gesture, palm out, like a stop sign, like he was telling me not to come forward. I didn't move. He pointed to his right, which was to my left, into the trees. I stared at him. He pointed again, slower this time, patient, like he'd done this before. I looked left. In my headlights, partially hidden by underbrush, I could see where the road edge dropped. A drop-off, not a gentle slope, a sharp vertical cut in the earth, like a washed-out embankment, maybe 6 or 8 feet down to a dry creek bed. I hadn't noticed it because the gravel road curved right there, and the drop was just off the edge, invisible in the dark. If I'd followed the GPS's instruction to turn right at any point in the last quarter mile and driven off that side of the road into what the GPS thought was a path, I would have gone over that drop. At 8 miles per hour on loose gravel, unable to stop in time. I looked back at the man. He had lowered his hand. He was still standing in the road, still watching me. I reversed slowly, all the way back to the paved section, watching him in my rearview mirror the entire time. He never moved. He just stood there in the middle of the gravel road, getting smaller and smaller in my rearview, until the bend in the road
swallowed him, and he was gone. I made it back to the main road. I drove the rest of the way to Fontana with my GPS turned off and my hazards on, for no reason except that the blinking lights made me feel less alone. I never got his name. I don't know who he was. I've thought about going back to find that road to see if it really existed, or to see if there really was a drop-off. I haven't done it yet. I'm not sure I ever will.
Story 3. I do a solo ride every fall. Just me, my bike, and whatever road feels right that morning. My name is Travis Holden, 41. I've been riding for 22 years. I know the Dragon well. I've ridden it a dozen times, always in the daylight, always in good conditions. It's one of those roads that demands your full attention, and I like that. When you're threading curves at the Dragon, you're not thinking about anything else. It's the closest thing I have to meditation. This past October, I came through on a Thursday, mid-morning, overcast but dry. Perfect riding conditions. I geared up properly, full helmet, jacket, gloves, and started working through the curves from the Deals Gap end heading south. About 2 miles in, I came around a right-hander, and there they were ahead of me. Motorcycles, a lot of them. A convoy, spread out in the staggered formation that group riders use. Left side, right side, alternating, one per lane position, proper spacing. They were all cruisers, Harleys and Indian-style bikes, dark paint, no bright colors. I counted 12 of them ahead of me before the road bent, and I couldn't see further. I backed off a bit. I don't like riding in groups I'm not part of. Too much chaos. I held my distance and just followed at my own pace. That's when I noticed something odd. The convoy was moving slowly, maybe 30 miles per hour through curves that most riders take at 50 or more. I told myself it was just a well-drilled club. Some groups practice that precision. I followed them for another mile, and then, coming out of a tight left-hander onto a short straight, I saw the first gap. One of the rear bikes was gone. Not overtaken, not pulled off, just gone. The spacing in the formation remained unchanged. There was simply one fewer bike, and the formation had contracted to fill the gap as though it had never existed. I watched harder. Around the next curve, another bike disappeared. Same thing. The formation contracted, spacing maintained. I pushed a little closer, not dangerously close, but close enough to see details. And that's when I realized the thing that made my blood go cold. There were no riders. I could see the backs of the bikes clearly now, 5, 6 of the rear machines. The seats were empty. The handlebars were there. The engines were clearly running. I could hear the collective rumble ahead of me. But I could not see any human beings on any of those bikes. I slowed down hard. I told myself it was the angle. I told myself it was the helmets and riding suits blending with the bikes. I told myself the overcast light was doing something tricky. But I've been riding for 22 years. I know what a rider looks like from behind. I know the posture, the shoulders, the helmet bobbing slightly with road vibration. There was nothing. Upright handlebars, running engines, empty seats. By the time I worked up the nerve to get close enough to see clearly, there were only 3 bikes left in the formation. And as I watched, the second to last one simply ceased to be there. No sound of it stopping, no braking, no turn-off, just there, and then not there. I came around the final bend to where the last bike should have been. The road was empty. I pulled over at the next possible spot and sat on my bike with my engine off for 10 minutes.
My hands were shaking. Not a little. Actually shaking, the way they did the first time I laid a bike down years ago. That specific kind of shake, that's your body processing something it doesn't know how to categorize. I'm not going to tell you those were ghost motorcycles. I'm not going to tell you I believe that. I don't believe in that. But I also have no explanation that works. 12 bikes, or something that looked like 12 bikes, running in precise formation, disappearing one by one, leaving no trace and no sound. I rode the rest of the Dragon without enjoying it. Something about those empty handlebars moving through the curves wouldn't leave my head. When I got to the Fugitive Bridge overlook at the south end, I stopped and got off my bike and stood there for a while. Below me, the road curved away into the trees and the river glinted between the banks. There was no one else on the road in either direction as far as I could see. The only thing I heard was wind. That road still bothers me to this day.
Story 4. My name is Rachel Tanner, and I want you to know up front that I'm a very practical, rational person. I'm a nurse. I've worked critical care for 8 years. I don't rattle easily. I've held people's hands while they died and kept my composure. I say this not to brag, but because what happened at that gas station shook me in a way that critical care, in all its horror, never has. I was driving back to Knoxville from a long weekend in Murphy, North Carolina. It was a Sunday evening in November. I'd taken Route 129 up through the mountains because I'd heard it was beautiful and I had the time. It was beautiful for about 40 minutes, and then the sun went down and the fog came in, and I was just trying to get home. I needed gas. My tank was hovering just above empty, and I was on a stretch of mountain road with no signal and no idea how far the next civilization was. So when I saw the lights of a gas station at a small wide spot in the road, a tiny commercial cluster, maybe 3 structures, I pulled in with tremendous relief. It was a full setup. Pumps under a canopy, the lights working, a convenience store with neon signs in the window, open, cold beer, lottery, all the signs of a functioning American gas station at 9 in the evening. I pulled up to the nearest pump, got out, inserted my card. The machine beeped, accepted my card, asked me to select my grade. Everything normal. I started pumping gas. I was alone at the pumps. That wasn't unusual. It was a Sunday night on a mountain road. I watched the numbers tick up on the pump and thought about nothing in particular. Then I noticed something disturbing. The store was lit inside, but through the large windows I couldn't see anyone behind the counter. I looked for maybe 30 seconds. No movement, no cashier, no one browsing the aisles. I told myself the cashier was in the back. Bathroom break, stocking shelves, normal things cashiers do. My gas finished. I replaced the nozzle. On impulse, I needed a coffee, genuinely needed one. 4 more hours of driving ahead. I decided to go inside. The door opened. A chime sounded, the kind most convenience stores have, the bright little electronic ding that announces customers. The lights were all on. The coolers were humming. The coffee station was set up, pots in their holders, one of them half full, heat lamp on. A TV in the corner was showing a football game with the sound low. No one was there. Hello? My voice. It sounded too loud in the empty store. No response. I walked to the counter. The register was on, screen lit. There was a stool behind the counter, and on the stool was a jacket, a canvas work jacket, the kind with a company logo on the breast. And on the counter, beside the register, was a coffee mug, still steaming. I touched the side of the mug. Hot. Not warmish. Actually hot. Is anyone here? Silence. I walked back through the store, called out again. Nothing. The door to the back room was ajar. I pushed it open slowly. Stock room, shelves with inventory, a mop in a bucket of gray water, a folding chair. On the folding chair, a phone, face down, screen dark. No person anywhere. I went back to the counter. I picked up a coffee cup from the stack next to the machine and poured myself a large coffee. I found an honor system box near the register and put $3 in it. More than the coffee cost, but it felt important to pay. Then I stood there for a moment, looking at the steaming mug on the counter and the jacket on the stool. Someone had been here minutes ago. Their coffee was still hot. They hadn't gone home. Their jacket was still here. They had simply stepped away at the precise moment I arrived, as if they knew I was coming and didn't want to be seen. Or something had caused them to leave in a hurry. I took my coffee and got back in my car. As I pulled out of the gas station onto the road, my headlights swept across the tree line at the edge of the property. Just for a second, at the edge of the light, I saw someone standing in the trees, completely still, just at the point where the trees started and the gravel ended, standing there, watching me leave. I drove away. I didn't stop again until I hit the interstate. I kept my doors locked and my eyes on the rear-view mirror for the next 20 miles. I've told myself a dozen explanations since. The attendant went to check something outside. The attendant was having a medical emergency behind a shelf. The attendant was, I don't know, any number of things. But the figure in the trees, the jacket on the stool, the hot coffee someone had been drinking 30 seconds before I walked in, that part I haven't explained away yet. Story 5. I was running an Appalachian Trail section hike with my college roommate, Dominic. But this story isn't about the trail. It's about the drive home. My name is Liam Fletcher, 26. We'd spent 4 days on the trail, came off at Fontana Dam, and were driving back north on 129 toward Deals Gap to catch the highway home. We were both exhausted in the good way, sore legs, happy, already planning where to stop for food. Dominic was in the passenger seat, asleep within 10 minutes. I had the radio and the mountain road and the mid-afternoon sun cutting through the trees. About 6 miles into the Dragon, I came around a curve and there was a couple walking along the road shoulder. An older man and a woman, 60s maybe, both in light hiking gear, walking south. They were on the shoulder, moving single file, the man slightly ahead. As I passed them, I noted them with the automatic attention a driver gives to pedestrians. Gray-haired man, blue jacket, woman behind him in a red shell jacket, backpack. I gave them wide berth and continued. A mile later, I came around a sharp left-hand bend, and there they were again. Same couple. Blue jacket ahead, red jacket behind. Same packs, same pace. I slowed slightly, confused. I'd passed them 1 mile back. Pedestrians don't cover a mile in the time it takes a car to navigate a mile of the Dragon. Not on foot, not even close. But there was no one else on the road, and these were clearly the same 2 people. I'd gotten a good look at them the first time, and the man had a distinctive gray beard, and the woman's red jacket had a tear on the right shoulder I'd noticed as I passed. I drove past them again, slower this time, studying them. They didn't look at my car. They kept walking, eyes forward, steady pace. I woke Dominic up. Hey Dom. I shook his arm. He surfaced grumpily. What? Look back down the road. Tell me if you see 2 people walking. He twisted in his seat, looked back. Yeah, old couple. So what? We passed them a mile ago. Okay. Dom. They were a mile back, walking. We passed them in a car, and they're already ahead of us. He looked at me, then back down the road where the couple was disappearing around a bend. "That's weird," he said, not particularly alarmed. He was still half asleep. 2 miles later, the couple was there again, same position on the shoulder. Man ahead, woman behind. Same pace. I braked hard enough that Dom braced against the dash. "What the?" "That's the 3rd time," I said. I pulled over and stopped. Both of us turned to watch them through the rear window. They walked past the back of my stopped car without looking at it. Their pace never changed. Their eyes never moved toward us. The woman's red jacket had the same shoulder tear. The man's gray beard. Identical, every detail. They walked around the next bend and disappeared. I sat there for a good minute. Dominic, now fully awake, said nothing. We both stared at the empty road behind us. "Do you want to follow them?" he said eventually. "No," I said. I drove north. I pushed the speed limit. I watched my mirrors. We came around 4 more miles of curves, and I never saw the couple again, neither behind me nor ahead of me. Dominic spent the rest of the drive theorizing. Multiple couples in similar clothes. A prank. Hitchhiking. He had an explanation for everything, and I let him talk because it was better than the silence. But the tear in the shoulder of that red jacket. It was in the same exact spot every single time. The same small L-shaped tear with the same frayed edges. 3 different sightings, 3 different miles, and that tear was identical every time. I never asked for an explanation after that. Some things are better left unasked. Story 6. Before I tell you this, I want to say clearly that I know how this sounds. I know. Believe me. I'm a software engineer. I spend my days debugging logic systems. I am the least mystical person I know. My name is Aaron Cross. I was 29 when this happened. I was driving alone, at night, through the Dragon section of 129, heading south. It was about 11 p.m. I had a road trip playlist going through my car's Bluetooth, and I was in a pretty good mood. The road was empty and dry, and I was taking the curves at a fun pace. Somewhere around mile 4, my Bluetooth cut out. Not unusual. The mountains mess with phone signal, and that sometimes disrupts the Bluetooth connection. I reached over and switched to FM radio. Found a country station that was coming in okay. Maybe 1 bar of static, but listenable. The song ended. Brief silence. Then an announcer's voice. "Coming up next, a dedication. This one goes out to Aaron, who's driving through the mountains tonight." I glanced at my radio. The display showed the station frequency. Nothing else. No caller ID. Nothing. Just a normal car radio. The next song started. Classic country. I drove through 2 more curves, with my heart going a little faster than it should have been. I told myself it was a common name. Aaron. Plenty of Aarons out there. The DJ makes a dedication, mentions a name, and by sheer coincidence, that name matches the guy driving alone at 11 p.m. through the Smoky Mountains. It happens. Names repeat. The song ended. The DJ came back. "That was for Aaron. Hope the mountain roads are treating you well tonight. This next one, well, this one's a little more personal." The hair on my arms stood straight up. I want to be very clear about something. I had my radio set to FM, not satellite, not connected radio, not Bluetooth. Over-the-air FM. The station I was on, I checked, was a country station out of Knoxville. A real station. I've looked it up since. Real call letters, real programming. No local FM station has any mechanism to know who is in a given car at a given moment. I turned the radio off. The car went silent, except for the engine, and the sound of the tires on the asphalt. I drove 3 more curves in the silence. Then, and I cannot explain this, I have never been able to explain this, I turned the radio back on. The same station. A new song was ending. The DJ said, "Good choice, Aaron, but you probably shouldn't be driving with the radio off. These roads are dangerous in the dark." I turned the car around. I don't care that there was a paved road ahead of me, or that I still had 6 miles to go on the Dragon, or that turning around meant adding 2 hours to my drive. I executed a U-turn in the middle of Route 129, and I drove back the way I came, and I kept the radio off the entire time. I don't have an explanation. I've had people suggest it was a prank by someone who could see my car somehow, a DJ looking out a window, an elaborate setup, something staged. I've considered those possibilities. I've considered that I was more tired than I thought, and I misheard. That the name coincidence was real, and I was interpreting innocent phrases as directed at me. But, "Good choice, Aaron," came 5 seconds after I turned the radio back on. I hadn't told anyone I was turning around. I hadn't called anyone. There was no way for any person in any radio station to know what I'd just done in a car on a mountain road at 11 p.m. That radio voice is the one thing in my life I truly cannot explain. And I am a man who deals in explanations for a living. That's what makes it the most unsettling experience I've ever had. Not the fear in the moment, though that was real, but the cold, quiet absence of a working answer that I still feel every time I think about it. Story 7. I run ultramarathons. I'm in excellent physical shape. I don't drink. I don't take medication. I have no history of any neurological conditions. My name is Morgan Delaney. I'm 34, and what I'm about to describe is the closest I have ever come to genuinely questioning my sanity. I was on a solo drive through the mountains, a simple point-to-point from Maryville, Tennessee, down to Andrews, North Carolina. I'd driven it once before, years ago, and I remembered it as beautiful. I started out in the early afternoon on a clear October day. Good spirits, good conditions. The Dragon section of 129 starts with a straightforward rhythm. You find the pace of the road, you feel the curves, you settle in. I know this road. I wasn't afraid of it. About 5 miles in, I entered a left-hand curve that was longer than the ones before it. Not unusual. The Dragon has long curves and short ones. I kept the wheel turned left, maintained my speed, watched the road. The curve continued. I waited for it to straighten out or transition to a right-hand bend. It kept going. I watched my GPS. The blue arrow tracking my position was moving. I was going somewhere. But the curve in front of me just kept turning. A gentle, steady, unending left-hand arc. After what felt like a minute, it may have been 45 seconds. It may have been 90. I genuinely couldn't tell. I started to feel a very specific and very strange sensation. Not dizziness exactly. More like the feeling that I had been in this curve before. Not déjà vu. Something more physical. My hands on the wheel had been in this exact position for so long that it began to feel like the only position they'd ever been in. The road ahead looked like the road I'd been looking at since I'd entered the curve. The trees on both sides looked the same. I checked my speed. I was doing 42 miles per hour. I was going somewhere, but I'd been in this curve long enough that I was starting to feel a low, creeping panic. I eased off the gas. 30 miles per hour. 20. 10. The curve just continued. At some point, and this is the part I still struggle with, I couldn't tell anymore whether I had been driving for 5 minutes or 5 hours. The curve was continuous, identical, perpetual. The same left-hand arc, the same trees, the same guardrail on my right, the same darkness in the forest on my left. I stopped the car. In the middle of the curve, just stopped, hazards on. Got out. The road was real. The asphalt under my feet was real. I could feel the temperature of the mountain air on my face. I walked back the way I'd come, and the curve went on behind me, too. A long, gradual, left-hand arc receding into the mountain. I walked forward past my car, and the curve continued. I stood in the middle of Route 129 with my hazards blinking, and looked in both directions, and saw nothing but the same gentle curve, the same trees, the same guardrail. I got back in the car. I started driving. I was moving now more out of reflex than intention, because stopping had somehow felt worse. Then the curve ended, just like that. The road straightened into a short flat, then transitioned to a right-hand bend, and the world snapped back to its normal shape. Road signs appeared, a pull-out area, the name of a landmark on a brown Forest Service sign. I pulled into the overlook and sat there for a long time. I drove the rest of 129 without stopping, checking my GPS constantly, needing to see the little arrow moving across a map, needing proof that I was going somewhere, that I was making progress, that the road was finite. I've looked at maps of Route 129 since. I've tried to find a curve long enough to account for what I experienced. There are long curves on that road, but nothing that should take more than 30 or 40 seconds at normal driving speed. My watch showed a gap. I'm a runner. I track everything compulsively. The GPS track on my phone showed a normal-looking arc on the map, a curve of reasonable length. But a 4-minute stretch of road between the timestamp when I entered the curve and the timestamp when I exited it, according to the data, should have taken about 40 seconds. 4 minutes. I don't know where the other 3.5 went. I'm not going to speculate about what that means. I just know what happened, and I know that curve felt like it was going to go on forever. And for a little while, at 10 miles per hour in the middle of the dragon, in the dark of the trees, I genuinely believed that it might. Story 8. I'd been driving since 5 in the morning. It was now past midnight. I wasn't in any kind of condition to be on mountain roads, but I told myself I just needed a place to sleep, and there was supposed to be a motel not far ahead. My name is Sandra Pruitt. I'm 51. I was driving back from my brother's wedding in Gatlinburg, heading back to my home in Asheville. I know the Smoky Mountain area well. I've driven 129, probably 20 times over the years. But I'd never tried to drive it tired and in the dark, and I was making a mistake doing it now, and part of me knew it. The motel appeared on my right after a long, straight section. Small place, maybe 20 rooms, single-story, L-shaped layout around a parking lot. I'd seen it before on other trips, never stopped, never had reason to. Tonight, I had every reason. The sign said, "Vacancy," in orange neon. I turned in. The parking lot was full. I mean completely, not a space available, full. Every slot in front of every room occupied. Trucks, sedans, SUVs, a couple of motorcycles. I drove slowly through the lot, looking for any gap, any half slot, any overflow area. Nothing. But the sign said, "Vacancy." I shrugged, parked with 2 tires in a weedy area at the edge of the lot, and walked to the office. The office light was on. A window with Venetian blinds, a door, a small sign, "Office, ring bell." I rang the bell. "I don't have any rooms," he said. "Your sign says vacancy." He paused, looked past me at the sign. Must have gotten stuck. Sorry. Fair enough. I thanked him and turned to go back to my car. Then I stopped. The parking lot was empty. I stood at the office door and stared. The same parking lot I had driven through 2 minutes ago, noting every occupied space, every parked vehicle. It was empty. Not a single car, not a motorcycle, not a truck. The lot was as bare as a Sunday morning. I turned back to the office door. The man was still there, watching me. "Where did all the cars go?" I said. He looked at the lot, then back at me. His expression was completely neutral, unreadable. "What cars?" I was too tired to argue, too tired to push it. I walked back to my own car, still half in the weeds where I'd parked it, the only vehicle in the lot, and got in and locked the doors. I drove 3 more miles and pulled over at a wide spot and slept in my reclined driver's seat for 4 hours. In the morning, I thought about going back. In the morning, in daylight, with coffee in me, the obvious explanation was that I'd been so exhausted I'd hallucinated the full parking lot. Sleep deprivation does that. It causes visual disturbances. It creates false perceptions. That explanation is almost certainly correct. Almost. Except that when I drove past the motel on my way back home that afternoon, it was daytime, and I could see the lot clearly. It had perhaps 12 spaces. In my memory from the night before, there had been at least 20 vehicles. 12 spaces. 20 vehicles. Even my hallucination was physically impossible. I don't stop at that motel. I'll never stop at that motel. The man at the door with the glasses pushed up on his forehead and the question, "What cars?" That look. That completely neutral, untroubled look. Like the answer was perfectly ordinary, and I was the one who didn't understand something. Story 9. I'm a travel photographer. I've been doing it professionally for 6 years, which means I've been to a lot of remote and beautiful places, often alone, often at odd hours. My name is Jordan Pierce, 32. I drove Route 129 in mid-September specifically for the photography opportunities, the curves, the fall foliage beginning to turn, the elevated views. I had my camera gear in the back seat, and I was planning to stop at every overlook and pull out along the way. The first overlook had someone in it, a lone figure standing at the rail, looking out over the valley. I slowed and looked as I passed. The person wasn't doing anything remarkable, just standing, hands on the rail, looking at the view. I drove on. Noted it mentally as a reason to not stop. A mile later, the second overlook. Another figure, standing at the edge. I stopped about 20 feet away. From this distance, I could see it was a woman, or appeared to be. Shoulder-length hair, slight build. She was absolutely motionless. I took one more step, and she turned her head. She looked at me for exactly 1 second. Her expression was blank, not hostile, not friendly, not anything. And then she turned back to look at the mountains. I took my photographs quickly and got back in my car. Something about her absolute stillness, the blankness of that 1 second look, made me deeply uncomfortable in a way I couldn't immediately name. Fourth overlook. Another figure. Same posture. Standing. Facing out. Motionless. I didn't stop. I drove past slowly and looked. Dark clothing. Still. Fifth overlook. Another. Sixth. Another. By the sixth one, I was not slowing down anymore. I was keeping my speed and my eyes forward, and fighting a very specific and rising panic. 6 overlooks. 6 motionless human figures, all in dark clothing, all facing the same direction, away from the road, toward the mountain views. I wish that was the end of it, but it wasn't. I was almost at the southern end of the Dragon when I came around a bend, and there was no overlook, just a straight section of road, and one of the figures was on the road shoulder, standing on the road shoulder, facing away from me, toward the trees, absolutely still. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I drove past at road speed, and my hands were white on the wheel, and I didn't look in my rearview mirror. I've since told myself this was some kind of organized event, a protest, a vigil, an art installation, a group of hikers who happened to be standing at viewpoints. I've told myself that many times. I've almost convinced myself. But the figure on the road shoulder wasn't near a view. There was nothing to look at, just trees and a drainage ditch and the mountain road. And it was standing the same way all the others had been standing, perfectly still, weight even on both feet, arms at sides, facing away, like it was waiting. I sent my best photos from that trip to a magazine. They published 3 of them. None of the published ones showed any of the overlooks with the standing figures. I'm not sure why I didn't submit those. I just didn't want anyone to see them. I'm not sure I want to see them again myself.
Story 10. The fog on the Dragon is not like regular road fog. I want you to understand this before anything else. My name is Tyler Oakes. I'm 23. I'd grown up hearing about Tale of the Dragon, and I'd finally driven down to experience it for myself. I'd read everything about it, the curves, the riders, the history. I was prepared for the road itself. I was not prepared for what mountain fog actually is. It wasn't raining. The sky had been clear earlier in the day. But as I worked my way through the Dragon late in the evening, the fog appeared from nowhere, not rolling in from one direction, just suddenly present, as if the mountain had exhaled it. Not thick at first, soft, gauzy, the kind that adds atmosphere. Within 3 miles, it was thick enough that my headlights were hitting a wall. I slowed to 20 miles per hour, then 15, then 10. At 10 miles per hour, I could see maybe 40 feet ahead. 40 feet on a road that curves every few hundred feet. Enough to see the next bend, and nothing after it. I was considering pulling over to wait it out when my headlights began to flicker. Not go out, flicker. A strobing, inconsistent light that turned the fog into something strobing and disorienting. I reached for my dashboard and hit every switch I could find, and the lights went steady again for about 30 seconds, then started strobing again. I pulled over, turned my engine off, turned it back on. The lights came on steady. I pulled back onto the road. 30 seconds later, both headlights went out entirely. Complete darkness. No ambient light, no moon, no other vehicles, nothing. Just the fog and the dark, and my car coasting on a mountain road with no idea where the edge was. I braked to a stop. I sat there in the dark, trying not to think about the fact that I was parked on a curve of Route 129 in thick fog with no lights, invisible to any vehicle that might come around the corner at speed. I hit my hazard lights. They worked. Whew, thank God, they worked. The orange blink pushed weakly into the fog in both directions. I tried the headlights again. Nothing. I got out my phone. 2% battery. I'd been using it for GPS the whole drive, and I'd forgotten to charge. I had enough to make one call, maybe, if I had signal. No signal. I got out of the car and stood beside it in the fog. I couldn't see 10 feet in any direction. The road was real under my feet. The guardrail was real when I found it with my hand. I was real, but everything else, the mountain, the trees, the curve of the road,
had vanished into white nothing. I stood there for what felt like a very long time. I heard a vehicle approaching from ahead. Headlights materialized in the fog. Just a pale glow at first, then two distinct cones of light. A truck. It came around the bend slowly. The driver must have seen my hazards and stopped ahead of me. A man got out, older, heavy-set, wearing a flannel shirt, carrying a flashlight. "You broke down?" "Headlights went out," I said. "I can't see anything." He walked over and looked at my car. "You park here and get in with me for a few minutes," he said. "I'll call for a tow once we're off the curve. Too dangerous here." He handed me his flashlight and pointed it toward my hazards. "Point that down the road so anyone coming up sees you first." He walked back to his truck. I stood there with his flashlight, pointing it down the road, while he sat in his cab and presumably made calls. The fog shifted slightly. In the brief clearing, maybe 5 seconds before it closed again, I could see the curve behind me, where I'd been driving, and I could see the guardrail on the far side of that curve, maybe 60 yards from where my car was parked. There was a gap in the guardrail, a significant gap, where a previous vehicle had hit it maybe, or where it had rusted and collapsed. A gap wide enough for a car to go through. If my headlights had failed 30 seconds later, I would have been in that section of curve with no lights. Going slowly, yes, but with no lights and thick fog and a gap in the guardrail above a drop I couldn't assess from where I was standing. I stood very still for a moment with that realization. The man in the truck made 2 calls. A tow truck came within the hour. The issue was a fuse, a single fuse corroded that had finally given out. $5 fix. The tow truck driver looked at where I'd been parked, looked at the curve, looked at the gap in the guardrail. "You're lucky you stopped where you did," he said. He said it simply, the way someone says something they mean but don't want to make too dramatic. And then he went back to his truck and didn't say anything else about it. I think about that gap in the guardrail sometimes. I think about the 30 seconds.
Story 11. I know you're not supposed to pick up hitchhikers. I know. I've known since I was a teenager. I pick up hitchhikers anyway. I always have. In 20 years of doing it, I've met hundreds of interesting people, helped dozens of people out of genuinely bad situations, and never once had a negative experience. That changed on Route 129. My name is Nathan Bridges. I'm 44. I was on a solo drive, no particular agenda, taking back roads through the Smokies, because that's how I prefer to travel. It was mid-morning, clear and cool. I came around a bend, and there was a young man on the shoulder with his thumb out. Late 20s, maybe. Slim, short hair, clean-shaven. Wearing jeans and a gray t-shirt, no jacket, despite the 55-degree weather. He had no bag, no backpack, no visible possessions at all. That was slightly odd, but I told myself he just left something in a car or was hiking between points. I pulled over. He came around to the passenger side and got in. "Thanks," he said. His voice was flat, not unfriendly, just toneless. "Where you headed?" I asked. "Down the road," he said. "Okay, fine. Not all hitchhikers want to talk." We drove in silence for a while. I put on the radio softly. He sat with his hands in his lap and looked straight ahead at the road. After a couple of minutes, I glanced over at him, the way you naturally glance at a passenger. He was looking straight ahead, eyes open, focused on the windshield. He wasn't blinking. I don't mean he was blinking infrequently, the way some people do. I mean his eyes were open, and his eyes were staying open, and I watched him for, I counted,
23 seconds, while keeping most of my attention on the road, and his eyes did not close once.
I looked back at the road. I told myself I'd miscounted, or miscalculated, or caught him between blinks or something. I checked again at the next opportunity. He was staring straight ahead, and his eyes were not blinking. "So, where are you coming from?" I asked, trying to normalize things. "Back there," he said, with the same flat tone, not pointing or looking. I kept driving. I kept checking. 3 minutes, maybe 4, of driving and talking, and intermittently watching him, and his eyes never closed. Story 12. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, and I'm not going to dress it up or try to explain it, because any explanation I've come up with sounds more absurd than the event itself. My name is Chris Mallory. I'm 37. I drove Route 129 alone on a Saturday in early November. Gray sky, dry road, medium traffic, enough other vehicles that I wasn't alone on the road, but spread out enough that I usually had the curves to myself. About 4 miles into the Dragon, I came out of a tight S-curve and could see a longer, straightish section ahead. And about 300 yards ahead of me was a car, the same car as mine. I'm aware that many cars look alike. I'm aware that modern vehicles, especially in common colors, can be nearly indistinguishable at distance. But this was not a case of a similar car. This was my car. I know my car. I've owned it for 4 years. The specific dark green color that Honda stopped making a few years back, the small dent in the rear quarter panel that I've been meaning to fix, the slightly misaligned trunk lid that sits a 1/4 inch higher on the left side, the university parking sticker in the bottom right corner of the rear window. All of it. I could see all of it in the 300 yards of near straight road before the next bend. I slowed down. I don't know why. Some instinct said to slow down. The car ahead was doing maybe 45. I fell back to maybe 30. We went through the next bend. I could see it in every curve, every time there was a sight line. That car, my car, the same specific, unique, individual car that I was currently driving. I pulled my speed down to 20, left more and more distance. I didn't want to catch up to it. I also didn't want to take my eyes off it. For 1.5 miles, I kept that car in sight. Then the road went into a section with shorter sight lines, a series of quick, blind curves, and I lost it. I came through 4 quick bends, and the road ahead was empty. I stopped at the next pullout and sat for a long time. My first rational thought was that it had to be a different car. My second rational thought was that the specific combination of color and damage and sticker that I had observed made that impossible. My third thought, and the one that scared me most, was that the only reason I could be seeing my own car driving ahead of me on a road I was currently driving was something I was not willing to finish thinking about. I drove the rest of the Dragon very slowly. I checked every turnout, every overlook, every spot where a car could have pulled off. Nothing. I got to the south end of the Dragon and parked in the lot near the bridge and walked around my car and looked at it carefully. Same dent, same misaligned trunk lid, same sticker. I stood in that parking lot for a long time. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. The car ahead of me had been going faster than I was willing to go. It had been moving with the kind of confidence I had felt at the start of the drive, before I saw it. It had been going the way I would have been going if I hadn't seen it. And the section of road where I lost it, where it disappeared, was a curve that later, talking to a local at a gas station, I found out was known locally by a not very funny nickname. They called it the landing curve.
because of how many vehicles had gone over the edge there in the past 20 years. I was never able to confirm whether that information was accurate. The gas station guy might have been messing with me. I hope that's what it was.
Story 13. I teach high school English. I'm a practical person. I grade papers. I attend faculty meetings. I manage teenagers for 8 hours a day. I don't have time for nonsense. My name is Patricia Weston. I'm 46. I was driving 129 south with my husband, who was asleep in the passenger seat. October, early afternoon, clear weather. I've told this story twice since it happened, once to my husband and once to a close friend. And both times, the person has looked at me with a specific kind of patient concern that I recognize from conversations where students are not quite telling the truth. I want to be clear, I am telling the truth. I passed a sign on the right side of the road, green background, white letters. Road signs. I noticed them the way an English teacher notices words. I read everything. The sign read, Deals Gap, 7 miles. Standard. Expected. I was 7 miles from Deals Gap going north, which was consistent with the distance I'd driven. Fine. 2 miles later, I passed what appeared to be the same sign. Same size, same color, same format. But it read, Deals Gap, 9 miles. I looked in my rearview mirror. The sign was behind me now, showing only its back. Green background, white letters. A road sign. I had driven forward 2 miles. The sign now said I was 9 miles from my destination instead of 7. Not 7 minus 2. 9. 2 miles further away than I'd been before I drove. I told my husband. He made the dismissive sound of a person who wants to stay asleep, and I let him. I kept driving. 4 miles later, I passed another sign. Deals Gap, 14 miles. I pulled over at the next possible point, got out my phone, pulled up the map. My location dot was exactly where it should be on Route 129, and by the map's measure, I was approximately 6 miles from Deals Gap. Not 14, not 9, 6. The road signs were wrong. Fine. Road signs are sometimes wrong. Old signs left in place after road changes, vandalized signs, maintenance issues. But the signs had been getting further, not closer. Each sign I passed told me I was further from my destination than the one before it. 14 miles further than my GPS said I was. I drove the remaining 6 miles without seeing another distance marker. Got to Deals Gap, turned around and drove back on the same road. I found one of the signs, the last one I'd passed, the 14 miles one. It said, Deals Gap, 14 miles. Same as before, except now I was driving away from Deals Gap, which meant that number would only make sense if it was giving the distance to someone driving south. It was on the wrong side of the road. A sign reading 14 miles was on the southbound shoulder, where it should have read a much smaller number, and I was on the northbound side, reading it from the wrong direction. The sign was backward, physically turned around, on the wrong side of the road, or maybe on the right side of the road, but printed for a traveler going the other way. I never found the 7 miles sign or the 9 miles sign to check them, and my husband slept through all of it. I dream about that sometimes. The numbers going the wrong way. Getting further from where I was going the more miles I drove. There's something about that image, the wrong direction, the distance increasing, that feels like it means something. I don't know what, but it doesn't feel like a dream about road signs. Story 14. I want to tell you about the morning I spent 3 hours trying to find a car that should have existed. My name is Kevin Marsh. I work for the Tennessee Department of Transportation, specifically in road condition assessment. I drive mountain roads for a living, and I know what I'm looking at when I'm on them. In February of last year, I was doing an early morning condition assessment on Route 129. Fresh snowfall the night before, maybe 3 inches, light and dry, with a hard freeze following it. The road surface had gotten just enough traffic by 7 a.m. to be passable, but the shoulders and pullouts were still pristine. Clean, white snow, untouched. On a condition run, I'm looking at everything. Surface condition, shoulder condition, drainage, guardrail integrity. I document what I see. About 3 miles in, I notice tire tracks in the snow on the right shoulder. Not on the road, on the shoulder, the untouched section. Fresh tracks, probably made within the past hour given the frost conditions. Standard passenger car width, clear tread marks. The tracks came from the road, I could see where they'd turned off, and went along the shoulder for about 40 feet before stopping. Not turning back onto the road, not going off the edge, just stopping. In the middle of the shoulder, 40 feet from where the car had turned off the road, the tire tracks simply ended. No car, no indication of where the car had gone. The snow beyond the end of the tracks was undisturbed. I stopped my truck and got out. I walked to the tracks and followed them. Clearly a vehicle, 2 sets of tracks, the correct width, correct spacing. The tread pattern was consistent all the way along. No spin out, no sliding, no sudden stop. The car had driven along the shoulder and then just ceased to drive. I looked in every direction. No turnoff, no path into the trees. The shoulder ended at a steep embankment with no gap. No ramp or drive or gravel pull-through. The tracks ended at the same point the car had been on the shoulder, and then there was nothing. I radioed in, asked dispatch if any incidents had been reported on this section. No incidents. I asked if any maintenance vehicles had been through that section overnight. No maintenance vehicles. I got my camera out and documented it. I took 12 photographs of the tracks and the endpoint. I measured the distance with my wheel measure. 43 feet of tracks, ending at a point where the snow beyond them was flat and undisturbed in all directions. A car had pulled off the road onto a shoulder, traveled 43 feet, and stopped, leaving evidence of its existence. I spent about an hour at that spot, trying to come up with an explanation. Theft. Vehicle removed by another vehicle, hoisted up somehow. That would require a flatbed tow truck, and I'd have seen evidence of it. The car driving back the way it came, no backward tracks, and the approach tracks showed a car turning off the road heading east, not from the east heading west. The tracks branching off in a direction I was missing. I walked every inch of the surrounding area. Nothing. I finished my condition run and filed my report. I noted the anomaly, described the tracks, attached my photographs. In the section marked Additional Observations, I wrote exactly what I'd found and that I had no explanation for it. My supervisor called me the next day. He said the photographs were clear, the documentation was good, and that I should note in the record that the track's origin was undetermined. He didn't sound bothered by it. He's been doing this for 30 years. Does this happen a lot? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Not a lot, he said. But that section of road, no, not for the first time. He didn't explain what he meant by that. I didn't ask him to. Story 15. I do search and rescue volunteer work with the county. I've been in these mountains dozens of times. I know the terrain. I know the agencies. I know the stations. My name is Bobby Estes. I'm 38. I was driving Route 129 southbound on a Thursday afternoon, heading to a trailhead for a solo day hike I'd been planning for a month.
About halfway through the Dragon section, I passed the ranger station. Small building, pull-off with a flagpole, the brown and tan color scheme of the National Forest Service. I'd passed it before, occasionally seen a ranger vehicle in the lot. I noticed it, the way you notice familiar landmarks, automatically, without much thought. Except this time the flag was down. Not at half-staff. Down, on the ground, bundled near the base of the pole. I slowed slightly. The lot was empty. No vehicles. The door of the station was closed. I almost drove on. It was Thursday. Maybe the ranger had a day off. Maybe the post was staffed intermittently. But in my SAR work, we have protocols around ranger stations. And I know they're generally staffed during hiking season, which this technically still was. I pulled in. The building looked okay from the outside. No broken windows, no visible damage. I got out and knocked on the door. No answer. Knocked again, harder. Nothing. I tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside, a standard small ranger station. The kind that's really just a room with a desk and some equipment storage. Everything appeared orderly. The desk had papers on it, trail count sheets, a weather log, a clipboard with what appeared to be hiking group registrations. Normal stuff.
But the last entry on the weather log was 4 days ago.
The hiking registration clipboard's most recent entry was 3 days ago. The papers on the desk were arranged the way someone had arranged them when they last sat there. Not disorganized like they'd been swept or searched. Just left. Mid-task. On the desk was a two-way radio, turned on. The power light was green. I picked it up, hesitated, then clicked the transmit button. Is anyone there? This is a civilian at the Chioa Section Ranger Station, 129. Station appears unstaffed. Door was unlocked. Then a voice. Copy that. We're aware of the situation at that station. Don't touch anything. Please step outside. I put the radio down and stepped outside. I waited by my car for about 20 minutes. No one came. I called the Forest Service general number on my cell. I had 2 bars, enough. The woman who answered was pleasant and said she'd pass along my concern and that the station may have been temporarily closed for administrative reasons. I asked about the flag on the ground. She said she'd make a note. I drove to my trailhead, did my hike, came back through in the late afternoon. The flag was still on the ground. The building was still locked. Actually locked now. Someone had come through and secured it. The lot was still empty. I've made a few calls since trying to find out what happened there. The Forest Service is politely unhelpful in the way that large government agencies can be when they don't want to answer a specific question. The ranger station is staffed again now. I drove past it 2 months later, and there was a vehicle in the lot, and the flag was flying. But whoever was in that station 4 days before I arrived had left mid-task, with the door unlocked and the radio on. And nobody at the Forest Service has ever explained to my satisfaction why that station was empty for at least 4 days with the lights on and the door open. In SAR work, we call that kind of scene a concern indicator, a sign that something interrupted normal activity. It doesn't mean something terrible happened, but it means something happened. I still don't know what.
Story 16.
I got married 6 years ago. My wife Diane and I take a driving trip every year for our anniversary. Always somewhere new, always somewhere remote. We like the quiet. My name is Stuart Ferris, 43. This past year we drove through the Smokies and finished the day at a campground off Route 129, a small place run by a guy named Walt, who seemed to have about 4 permanent residents and 6 camping spots, and was clearly only marginally in the campground business. We set up our tent, cooked on our camp stove, sat by a small fire until Diane fell asleep in her camp chair, and I carried her to the tent. I stayed outside for another hour, watching the fire die. The campground was quiet. The night was clear but dark. No moon, just stars and the sound of the forest. I went to bed around 11. At approximately 1 in the morning, I woke up to a knocking sound. Not on the tent, on the car. We'd parked about 20 feet from the tent. The knock was metallic and deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. A pause, then tap, tap, tap again. 3-beat rhythm, unhurried. I sat up. Diane was still asleep. I listened. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. I unzipped the tent quietly and looked out. The car was right there, exactly where we'd parked it. The fire was long dead, just pale ash. The campground around us was dark. The other campers, there had been 2 other occupied sites when we arrived, were dark and quiet. Tap, tap, tap.
Coming from the rear of the car. Something was knocking on the trunk or the rear quarter panel. I put on my shoes and grabbed my flashlight and walked toward the car. The knocking stopped when I got close. I swept the flashlight around the car. Nothing behind it, nothing at either side, nothing visible that could have made the sound. I went back to bed. 20 minutes later, tap, tap, tap. This time I was at the tent door before the second sequence ended. I got there fast enough that the sound was still happening when I looked out. There was nothing at the car. My flashlight lit the car and the ground around it. Nothing. I walked all the way around the car, checked underneath with the flashlight. A dumb bravado move that I don't really recommend, but I needed to do something active. Nothing under the car. I got back in the tent. Diane, somehow, was still asleep. Tap, tap, tap. Now I woke her up. She came awake fast, the way people do when they've been woken by a concerned partner in a tent in the middle of nowhere. "Listen," I said. We both listened. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Her eyes went wide. I put my hand on her arm, stay, and went back out. I got out of the tent and I started talking, out loud, to whoever or whatever was doing the knocking. "Hey, I can hear you. I'm going to take a look around. If you need help, please say something." Silence. I walked to the car, walked around it, walked to the edge of the campground site, and looked into the trees with my flashlight. The trees gave back nothing. I went to the next campsite over, a couple in a small camper van. I knocked on their door, lightly, apologetically. A woman opened it, younger than us, mid-30s, hair disheveled. "Sorry to bother you," I said. "Have you heard knocking? Anything hitting a car?" She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "Yeah, we've heard it. We've been hearing it since about midnight." "What do you think it is?" She looked past me at the dark campground. Then she said, "Our window has been fogging up, from outside, like there's something breathing on the glass." We didn't sleep the rest of that night. We sat in our tent with the lantern on and the zipper done up tight, and we listened. And at irregular intervals, the knocking came back. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. Not frantic, not aggressive, patient. At dawn, we packed in 15 minutes and left. I've looked for explanations, expansion and contraction of metal as temperatures drop. But the rhythm was too consistent and too deliberate for thermal expansion. An animal, but animals don't knock in 3-beat patterns with deliberate pauses.
Diane doesn't want to discuss it. She's said twice that she thinks we should not go back to that campground. I haven't argued. I just want to know what was counting.
Story 17. I want to be very direct with you. I'm a former Marine. I did 2 tours. I don't do the "I'm scared" voice that people on the internet use for stories like this. I'm just going to tell you what happened and let it speak for itself. My name is Marcus Webb, 45. I was driving Route 129 alone, eastbound, heading from Robbinsville toward Deals Gap. It was night, close to midnight, and I had the road mostly to myself. I was in a good, alert state of mind. Not tired, music off, just the road. About 3 miles in, my passenger door opened. Not the window, not a latch vibration. The door opened, swung out about 6 inches, and then was pushed back shut by the airstream of the moving car. The interior light came on for that second, and then went off. I was going 40 miles per hour through a curve. I braked to a stop in the next safe spot, which was about a quarter mile ahead, got out, walked around the car, looked at the passenger door latch, pushed it closed, tested it, firm, opened and closed it several times. The mechanism was functioning normally. I got back in, continued driving. Told myself it was a faulty latch, that the road vibration had bounced it open for a moment. Half a mile later, the door opened again. Same thing, swung 6 inches out, then pushed back by the wind, interior light momentarily on. I stopped again. This time I held the door from inside, testing the latch manually while wiggling the car by rocking it. The latch held. I slammed the door twice. It stayed shut. Third time I stopped, I used my jacket to brace the door from inside. Wrapped the jacket around the handle in a way that would keep pressure on it. The door stayed shut for another mile. Then it opened again, and this time the jacket was pushed outward with it. Not gently, pushed. The sleeve of my jacket briefly flapped in the outside air before the wind caught the door and pushed it back. I stopped on the shoulder. I sat for a moment in the dark with my jacket back in the seat and the interior light off and the engine running. My passenger door had opened 4 times on a mountain road at midnight. The latch was functional. A physical brace had been pushed aside. I sat there for maybe 2 minutes, thinking about what to do. Then I picked up my jacket from the passenger seat and I moved it to the back seat, because I wanted to be able to see the passenger seat without anything on it. I looked at it for a long time in the dim light. I don't know what I was looking for. Or maybe I do know, and I don't want to say it. I drove the rest of the Dragon slowly, with my eyes moving between the road and the passenger seat every 30 seconds or so. The door didn't open again. When I got to the Deals Gap end and parked, I opened and closed the passenger door a dozen times. Perfect, solid mechanism. No fault I could find. I had the car's door latch checked by a mechanic the following week. He found nothing wrong with it. He said the latch was in excellent condition. I drive the car every day. The door has not opened since. I don't have an explanation. I'm not going to pretend I do. I'm just a former Marine who drove a mountain road at midnight and had his passenger door open 4 times for no reason that a mechanic could identify. And that's a thing that happened, and I think about it more than I'd like to. Story 18. I'm a sociologist. I study human behavior for a living. I want you to hold that in mind as I tell you this, because my professional training is specifically in observing patterns in human groups, and what I saw at that rest area was wrong in a way that I could identify precisely because of my training.
My name is Dr. Linda Holt, 52. I was doing a driving research observation trip through Appalachian communities, a project I won't go into the details of, that had me on Route 129 in late summer. I pulled into a rest area around 2 in the afternoon, needing a bathroom and a stretch. The rest area was a modest one. Restrooms, a few picnic tables, vending machines, a covered pavilion. 4 cars in the lot when I pulled in. I didn't pay particular attention to them and went to the restrooms. When I came out, I looked at the people in the rest area. There were 6 of them visible. At first glance, I noted what any sociologist would note: approximate ages, apparent relationships, posture, clothing, normal observational cataloging. Then I stopped walking. 3 of the 6 people were dressed identically. Same khaki shorts, same white polo shirt, same white sneakers. 3 different people, 2 men and a woman, in exactly the same outfit. Not similar, identical, including the shoes. I noted it and moved on mentally. Odd, but not impossible. A group, perhaps a family, wearing coordinated clothing for travel or a group function. I went to the vending machine. While I was getting a water, 2 more people came out of the restrooms, also in khaki shorts and white polo shirts and white sneakers. 5 of the 8 people now visible at this rest area were dressed identically. I'm a sociologist. My brain went to the most logical explanation: a large, organized group traveling together. A church group, a team, a tour group. This happens. But they weren't together. They were at separate tables, separate cars. The 2 who'd just come out of the restrooms got into different vehicles. They didn't look at each other. They showed no signs of social recognition. I sat down at a picnic table and I did what sociologists do. I systematically observed. I watched for eye contact between the identically dressed individuals. None. I watched for shared conversation. None. I watched to see if they arrived and departed together. The woman in white polo got into a Honda alone. One of the men got into a pickup truck, also alone. 6 people now, individually, in the same outfit, showing no social connection to each other. The 6th person, who had just pulled in, got out of a sedan and walked past me toward the restrooms. Khaki shorts, white polo, white sneakers. I said, perhaps a little too directly, "Nice outfit." He looked at me, smiled, perfectly normally. "Thanks," he said, and kept walking. Normal voice, normal face, normal human smile. I left before he came back out. I don't know why. Some professional instinct trumped by something more basic reason that I haven't fully analyzed. I just walked back to my car and got in and pulled out. In my rearview mirror, as I rejoined the road, I could see the rest area receding. All of the identically dressed individuals were at their separate locations. None of them were looking at my departing vehicle. I've thought about this in specifically sociological terms many times since. There are explanations that work on the surface: a tour group with no visible guide, a corporate event with branded clothing, even an improbable statistical coincidence of wardrobe choices. I've constructed those explanations carefully. None of them fully account for the complete absence of social recognition between the identically clothed individuals. Humans in groups, especially groups sharing a visual identity marker like clothing, exhibit group behavior. They look at each other, they nod, they acknowledge the shared affiliation. These people didn't. That rest area still bothers me to this day. Story 19. I don't know how to explain this to someone who hasn't been on that road in that fog. I've been a sound engineer for 15 years. I know how acoustics work. I know how sound behaves in different environments. I know what silence is, and I know what it isn't. What happened on Route 129 that November night was not silence. It was the absence of something that should have been there. My name is Elliot Rhodes, 37. I was driving alone, heading south in fog thick enough that I'd slowed to about 15 miles per hour. My windows were cracked. I do that in fog, because hearing the road helps when seeing it is limited. The fog appeared gradually over about a mile, and as it thickened, I noticed that the road sounds were muffling, which makes sense. Fog does absorb some high-frequency sound. The tire on asphalt hiss got quieter, which I attributed to the slower speed and the fog. Then everything got quieter, not gradually. In one moment, as if someone had turned a dial, the road went silent, not quiet, silent. My tires were still moving on the pavement, and I could feel the vibration through the seat and the steering wheel, but I could not hear them. My engine was running. I could see the RPM gauge, but I could not hear it. I reached over and turned off the radio, which I'd already turned down to near zero. The silence was complete. I rolled my window fully down, put my hand out. I could feel the cold, damp air rushing past at 15 miles per hour. But there was no wind sound, no road sound. The fog around my car, visible in my headlights, was absolutely still and absolutely silent. I am a sound engineer. I understand the physics. What was happening was not physically consistent with a car in motion on a road. Something about the fog density, the mountain topography, the specific physics of that moment and that place had created a sound environment that my professional understanding told me should not exist. I turned on my hazard lights and stopped the car. In the silence, I turned off my engine. Complete silence. Not the comparative silence of a quiet country road. Complete. No insects, no wind in the trees, no water sounds, no distant traffic. The specific kind of total silence that sound engineers pay a lot of money to create in professional recording booths, and that does not occur naturally in an outdoor environment. I held my breath because my own breathing sounded enormous in that space, and when I stopped breathing, there was truly nothing. I started the car. The engine sounds returned but were muted, strange, as if coming from very far away. I drove forward slowly. For approximately a quarter of a mile, the silence held. Then, again, not gradually, in a single moment, the sounds came back. Tires on asphalt, engine noise, wind, the rustle of the trees at the road edge, all of it, full volume, like a switch had been thrown. I pulled over and sat for a few minutes. My hands were steady, but my mind was not. I've been in recording environments designed by experts to eliminate sound, and I've never experienced anything as complete as that quarter mile on Route 129. I've since researched acoustic anomalies in mountain terrain. There are documented phenomena, temperature inversions, fog layers, specific topographic configurations that can affect sound propagation in unusual ways. I believe something in that category happened to me. I believe there is a scientific explanation, but affects sound propagation in unusual ways and makes a highway go completely silent for a quarter mile are not the same category of experience. And the silence itself, the quality of it felt intentional. That's the part that doesn't fit any physical model I know. It felt like the road was listening. Story 20. I need you to know that I am a licensed therapist. I understand the mechanics of panic. I understand anxiety. I'm trained in the recognition and de-escalation of psychological spiraling. None of that helped me. My name is Vanessa Ortega. I'm 41. I drove Route 129 on a September evening heading north to Deals Gap. I'd done the Dragon before, years ago, in better conditions. This time there was light rain and it was getting dark, and I was driving alone. And within the first mile, I felt the anxiety start. Not the mild discomfort of a challenging road, but the specific accelerating machinery of a genuine anxiety spiral. I know what that machinery is. I've helped dozens of clients through it. I know that it feeds on itself, that the awareness of the anxiety becomes part of the anxiety, that the brain starts generating threat signals that amplify each other. Knowing all of this did not stop it from happening. By mile 2, my breathing was shallow. By mile 3, my hands were tighter on the wheel than they needed to be. By mile 4, I was beginning to actively search for a place to turn around, and there was no place to turn around because that road doesn't offer turnoffs easily, and the searching with nowhere to go became its own input to the spiral. I want to explain what the specific horror of that road is when you're in that state. The curves never resolve. Every time you exit one curve, the next one begins. There's no straight section long enough to let you breathe. There's no point at which you can see more than 100 yards ahead. In a normal anxiety state, that might be manageable, but when you're already spiraling, every new blind curve feels like a new threat, and the threats are unending, and the road just keeps going, and the dark forest on both sides is close enough to feel like walls. I pulled into a turnout, small, gravel, barely big enough for my car, and stopped. Turned on my hazards, sat there doing the breathing exercises I teach my clients. 4 counts in, hold 4, out 4, hold 4. My heart rate slowed to something manageable, 10 minutes. I pulled back onto the road. I would go slowly. I would be fine. Mile 5. The rain picked up, my wipers went to high speed. The curves continued, the forest continued, the dark continued. Mile 6. Something, I still don't know if it was real or anxiety generated, caught my eye in the trees to my left. A shape, pale, roughly the height of a person, between the trees, moving parallel to my car. I told myself it was a deer. I told myself it was a reflection of my own headlights in the mist. I told myself I was in an elevated anxiety state, and my threat perception was hypersensitive. But I accelerated, unreasonably, for that road. My rational mind said slow down. My body said go. Mile 7. A curve I was going too fast for. I braked hard, fishtailed slightly on the wet road, got it back. That fishtail, that second of real danger, was somehow the thing that broke the spiral. The actual physical danger landed me back in my body and out of my head. I slowed to 20 miles per hour. I drove the remaining 4 miles carefully. When I reached the Deals Gap end and pulled into the lot, I sat in the car with the engine off for 15 minutes. Not panicking anymore. Just sitting with the knowledge that I, a therapist who treats anxiety disorders, had just spent 7 miles of mountain road in a full anxiety spiral that I had been unable to stop, and that the road had felt actively unkind, and that the shape in the trees, real or not, was going to stay with me for a while. I tell my clients that anxiety creates a version of the world that feels real but isn't, that the threat perception is the disorder, not the world. I believe that. I still believe that. But I haven't driven 129 after dark since. Professionally, I know what that means. Personally, I've decided I'm allowed to have one road I don't drive in the rain. Story 21. I've told this story once before to my older brother 3 days after it happened. He believed me. He didn't say much. He just nodded slowly and said, "You stayed on the road?" And when I said yes, he said good. And we didn't discuss it again. My name is Caleb Wright. I'm 27. Last spring in April, I drove Route 129 south in a heavy rainstorm. I know that's not ideal. I know the road. I'd ridden it before on a motorcycle in good weather. I had a car, I had time, and I thought the rain was manageable. She was standing in the road at mile 4, a woman facing south, facing the direction I was driving. White raincoat, belted, the kind with a hood, the hood up, standing perfectly still in the middle of the southbound lane. I saw her at about 80 yards and braked hard. The road was wet. My car slid a little before catching, and I stopped about 30 feet from her. She was standing completely still. Rain was hitting her coat and running off it in streams. She was just standing there in the middle of the road in the rain. I put on my hazards. I rolled my window down a few inches despite the rain. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" She didn't turn around. She didn't respond. "Ma'am, I can see you. Are you okay?" Nothing. I turned on my high beams. The light hit her coat, and it was very white against the dark rain and the dark trees and the dark road. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds. A car was going to come up behind me. I needed to either move forward or figure out what was happening. I honked twice, short, not aggressive. The woman did not react. I put the car in park, left the hazards on, and got out of the car in the rain. I walked toward her. "Ma'am, I don't want to startle you. I just want to make sure you're okay." I got to about 15 feet. I could see that her hands were at her sides. Her hood was pulled far forward over her face. She was not wearing any visible footwear, just her feet on the wet pavement, no shoes. I stopped at 15 feet. "Can you hear me?" She turned her head slightly, not to look at me. She turned it to the right, toward the tree line, as if she heard something there that I couldn't hear. I looked at the tree line, rain hitting leaves, darkness between the trunks. When I looked back at her, she was walking. Not toward me, not away from me. She was walking toward the guardrail on the right side of the road, moving at a slow, steady, deliberate pace. "Wait," I started after her. She reached the guardrail and put her hand on the top of it, looked over it, down at whatever was below. The rain was too heavy for me to see what was down there from where I was standing. "Please don't," I said. I don't know what I was preventing, I just said it. She stood at the rail for a moment. Then she stepped back from it, turned, and walked along the guardrail, heading south, away from me, along the edge of the road. Her white coat disappeared into the rain within 30 or 40 feet. The rain was that heavy. I stood on the road in the rain for a moment. Then I went back to my car, turned on the heat, and sat with my hands on the wheel, trying to decide what to do. I drove south slowly, looking for her. I drove 2 more miles and didn't see her again. A white raincoat on a dark, rainy mountain road. I would have seen her. If she had been on the road ahead of me, I would have seen her. I called the non-emergency police line when I got signal, reported a woman on the road, described her, gave the mile marker as best I could estimate. The dispatcher was professional and said they'd send someone to check. I don't know if they found her. I called back 2 days later to ask. The dispatcher said there had been no report of a woman found on that section of road and no missing persons report matching the description I'd given. I asked if there was anyone I could follow up with, and the dispatcher gave me a number that rang twice and went to voicemail. I never heard back from anyone, the bare feet on the wet pavement. That's the detail I keep coming back to. In April, in the mountains, in a rainstorm, standing in the road with no shoes, in a white coat, with her head turned toward the tree line like she was listening. I don't know who she was. I don't know what she was doing there. I just know I've driven past that guardrail twice since, and both times I've slowed down and looked over it, and there's a steep drop on the other side, down to the river. Story 22. I had a dash cam in my car because my insurance company offered a discount for it. It recorded continuously. I never looked at the footage unless I had a reason to. My name is Jennifer Castillo, 35. I drove Route 129 alone last October on my way to a leaf-peeping trip in the Smokies. The drive itself was uneventful. I remember it that way. The curves, the fall colors, the empty road, a pleasant couple of hours by myself. When I got to the cabin I'd rented for the weekend, I was unpacking my bag and I knocked my camera mount off the windshield. It hit the dashboard and the dash cam unit popped open. I fiddled with it for a few minutes trying to get it back together, and in the process, without particularly meaning to, I connected it to my laptop to check if the SD card was okay. The most recent file was the drive that day. I opened it. The footage was clear and sharp. The camera was a good one. I watched it for a minute, mostly just confirming it had recorded normally. The mountain curves scrolled past, the fall colors in the trees, my steering wheel at the bottom of the frame. Then I noticed the back seat. The camera's angle was wide enough to pick up, in the upper portion of the frame, the upper half of my rear seat reflected in the rear view mirror. I'd never thought about this before. I'd never actually watched my own dash cam footage carefully. There was someone in the back seat. I paused the video. The image was clear. A person, a man, from the shape and the short hair, sitting in the right rear passenger seat, head slightly forward, face not clearly visible, but clearly a human figure. I stared at the screen for a long time. I rewound. At the start of the footage, before I entered the Dragon section, the back seat was empty. I watched myself drive from the point where I'd parked to get a coffee before the Dragon, and the back seat in the mirror was clearly empty. I could see both headrests, both seat backs, the empty cushions. Then, approximately at the 2-mile mark of the Dragon section, the figure was there. It was simply there. No point of entry. I hadn't stopped. The doors hadn't opened. No one had gotten in. One frame it was empty. The next frame there was a person sitting there. I sat in the rental cabin with my laptop screen lit in the darkening room, and I scrolled through the footage frame by frame. The figure was there for approximately 9 minutes of driving, sitting, not moving. Head slightly forward. Then, as abruptly as it had appeared, it was gone. One frame, it was there. Next frame, empty seat. I checked if the doors had opened. The dashcam had an event indicator, a small flag on the timeline when the doors opened or a sharp movement was detected. No flags for the 9-minute window. No flags at all except the ones for the curves where the camera registered the lateral movement. I've asked people since about explanations, a shadow, a bag I'd left on the seat, a trick of the rearview mirror. I've genuinely tried these explanations on the footage. There was no bag in the back seat. The shadow had the wrong shape and moved independently of the vehicle's movement. The rearview mirror reflection was consistent and showed no distortion. What it shows, 9 minutes of Route 129, is a person sitting in my back seat. I deleted the file. I shouldn't have, I know that now. But I deleted it and ejected the SD card and sat with my back against the cabin wall for the rest of that evening. I got home 2 days later and sold the dash cam on a resale app. I told the buyer it worked great. It did work great. That was the problem. Story 23. I'm going to tell you that I broke down on Route 129 at 11 in the evening, and a tow truck arrived in 8 minutes, and somehow, that is one of the most frightening things that has happened to me in 40 years of driving. My name is Gary Hendricks, 61. I was driving the Dragon heading north when my check engine light came on, followed immediately by a loud metallic knock from the engine. The kind of knock that any driver knows means stop the car now. I got to a pullout, killed the engine, tried a restart, heard the knock again, and accepted that I was done driving for the night. I called my roadside assistance. I was told I was outside the typical service area and they would attempt to locate a local provider. They said it could be up to 2 hours. Fine. 2 hours on a mountain road at 11 p.m. was not ideal, but I'd dealt with worse. I had my hazards running, I had water, I had a coat. I settled in to wait. 8 minutes later, a tow truck pulled into the pullout behind me.
Not a roadside assistance branded truck. An older flatbed, white with rust streaks along the lower panels. No company logo on the side. The truck's running lights were on, and its yellow emergency flasher was going. It came in exactly like a tow truck should, pulled past me, started backing up to position for the loading. A man got out, big, maybe 6'2", heavy. Working clothes, a ball cap with no logo. He walked over to my window. "Need a tow?" Yeah. How did you know I was here?" He gestured vaguely back toward the road. "Drive this road a lot. Saw your hazards." That was plausible. A local who drove 129 regularly might scan the pullouts. At 11 at night, maybe. Okay. "I've already called my roadside assistance," I said. "They're not going to get anybody up here in under 2 hours," he said, without hesitation, as if he knew exactly who I'd called and what they'd told me. "I can take you to Robbinsville tonight." I looked at his truck. The flatbed was clear. The cab had a cracked windshield that had been patched with a strip of clear tape. The driver's door had a different shade of white from the rest of the truck. A replacement door, unpainted to match. Old truck, working truck, nothing unusual. "How much?" I asked. He named a price. Fair, maybe a little low, which on a mountain road at 11 at night should have been the first flag. "Let me make a call," I said.
I called my son-in-law, who is mechanically informed, told him the situation. He said if the price was fair and I felt okay about it, it was probably fine. Okay, I told the driver, let's do it. He loaded my car efficiently and professionally. I got in the cab. We pulled out. For the first 5 minutes, the conversation was normal. He asked what the car had done. I described the knock. He nodded like he recognized it. Normal tow truck small talk. Then I asked him something that had been bothering me. When I broke down, I said, I called roadside assistance from inside the pullout. My hazards weren't on yet. How did you see me? He was quiet for a moment, long enough that I noticed the silence. I was parked down the road, he said. How far down the road? He was quiet again. Not far. I thought about that. On Route 129 at 11 p.m., parked off the road, waiting. Parked far enough away that I hadn't seen him when I pulled off, but close enough to see me, without my hazards, before I'd even turned them on. Were you waiting for someone? I asked. Just in the area, he said. For the rest of the 40-minute drive to Robbinsville, I talked as little as possible. He delivered me to a motel and unloaded my car, and I paid him, and he drove away, and I stood in the motel parking lot watching his taillights disappear. My roadside assistants called at 12:58 a.m. They said they'd located a provider who could reach me in approximately 45 minutes. I told them I'd already been picked up. There was a pause on the line. You've already been towed? By whom? I told them I didn't know the company name. No logo on the truck. Another pause. Did you call anyone else? They asked. Any other service? No, I said. He just showed up. A third pause. Please make sure your vehicle is in a secured location, the representative said. And that was all she said about it. I've thought about it from the driver's angle. A man who drives that road regularly and monitors the pullouts for breakdowns and shows up fast and works cheap. That could be someone who makes a living doing exactly that. An informal tow operator who knows the road better than any dispatched service does. But parked in the dark on Route 129 at 11 at night, close enough to see me before my hazards were on, waiting. I didn't ask him what he'd been waiting for. I should have. I chose not to. That choice, the small, quiet, self-protective choice not to ask a question I didn't want answered, is the part of that night I come back to most.
Story 24. My daughter and I do a camping trip every summer. She's 12 and she loves it. The hiking, the cooking on the fire, the stars. We've been doing it since she was 6. My name is Alan Diaz, 47. We camped in a Forest Service site off Route 129 in July. This is the story I haven't told my daughter the truth about. She knows something was strange that night. I haven't told her how strange. We'd gone to bed around 10. Good day, good hike, good dinner. I fell asleep easily in the tent. I woke up at approximately 2 in the morning for no apparent reason. Sometimes I do that, middle of the night wakefulness for no cause. I lay there for a minute, adjusted my sleeping bag, tried to go back to sleep. There was light coming through the tent wall. Not the diffuse blue of moonlight or the orange glow of coals. A sharper, whiter light, stationary, from the direction of the tree line about 50 yards from our camp. I told myself it was a passing car on the road, but the road was 100 yards away in the other direction, and the light was in the trees. I unzipped very quietly and stepped out of the tent without waking my daughter. The light was there. A single point, white and cold, roughly head height, about 50 yards into the trees. Still, not moving, not flickering, just a steady, cold white point in the forest dark.
I stood outside the tent for maybe a minute, watching it. It didn't move. Then a second light appeared, about 20 feet to the right of the first, same height, same color. Then a third, another 20 feet further right. All three equally spaced, equally bright, equally still. I got back in the tent and unzipped my pack as quietly as I could and got out my bear spray, which is what I had, which is not what I wanted, but it was what I had. Then I got out my headlamp and went back outside. The three lights were still there. I turned my headlamp toward them. The lights went out, not faded, not moved away. All three, simultaneously, gone. Like switches thrown. I stood with my headlamp shining into empty, dark forest. Then, further away, deeper in the trees, where my headlamp beam didn't reach, the lights came back. Not 3 anymore. I counted 7 before I stopped counting. Moving now, slowly, in loose formation, drifting laterally through the trees, roughly parallel to the campsite, going from right to left. I watched them move for probably 2 minutes. Steady drift. No sounds from the forest, no voices, no footsteps, no branch snap. Just the lights, moving slowly through the dark. My daughter said, "Dad?" from inside the tent. I said, "It's okay. Go back to sleep." She unzipped the tent and came out. Before I could redirect her, she was standing next to me, looking at the lights. We stood together and watched them move. 7 of them, drifting. Then they slowed. Then they stopped. Then, over maybe 30 seconds, they went out one by one. The last one stayed the longest. After the other 6 were gone, this single white point sat in the distant dark of the forest for maybe a full minute. Then it went out, and we were in full dark. My daughter looked at me. "What were those?" she asked. "Not sure," I said. "Probably some hikers." She went back to bed. I don't think she believed me. I've looked up every rational explanation. Bioluminescence, foxfire fungi, glowing wood decay. But foxfire doesn't produce that level of brightness or that cold white color. Hikers, as I told my daughter, but no sound, no beam swinging, no voices. Wildlife. I have no idea what wildlife produces 7 synchronized moving lights. I found some accounts online from people who've seen similar things in Appalachian forests. They call it different things. Most of the accounts describe the same feeling I had. The lights were aware that they were being watched, aware of the headlamp, aware of my daughter's voice. I can't confirm that. I can only say it was the impression I had, and the impression stayed with me, and we don't camp on that section of 129 anymore. My daughter asked me about it again on the drive home. I told her I thought it was campers with unusual lanterns. She looked at me the way 12-year-olds look at their parents when they know they're not getting the real answer. She hasn't asked again. She will, eventually. I'm not sure what I'll tell her when she does. Story 25. This is the last story, and I want to tell it carefully, because it's the one I'm least sure about. Everything else I've described, the unease, the odd encounters, the things I couldn't explain, I experienced while fully awake and functional. This one has enough ambiguity that I've genuinely questioned my own account. But here is what I remember. My name is Nora Callahan. I'm 31. I grew up in Knoxville, and I know the Smokies well. I know Route 129. I've known that road since my father first drove it when I was 7 years old, and I've driven it myself more times than I can count. I don't know where the bridge came from. It was March, early spring. I was driving south on 129 in the early evening. The particular gray-green twilight of Appalachian spring, when the trees are starting to bud and the light goes weird in the hills. I wasn't in a hurry. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just driving a road I knew. About 2 miles past the Tennessee-North Carolina state line, in a section I've driven 100 times, I came to a bridge. It was a real bridge, a vehicular bridge, old concrete construction, 2 lanes wide. Below it, from what I could see in the fading light, was a creek or small river. The bridge was maybe 30 yards long. Guardrails on both sides, slightly rusted in that way old bridge guardrails go. A small brown sign on the right approach that I didn't read clearly as I crossed.
I crossed it. The tires made the hollow sound that tires always make on bridge decks. I drove another mile and pulled over to check something on my phone. While I had it out, I looked at the map. My dot was on Route 129, exactly where it should be. I zoomed in. No bridge. I scrolled the map around in both directions along the road. No bridge. No creek crossing. No water feature that would require a bridge at that point in the road. I thought my map app was wrong. Map apps are sometimes wrong about minor infrastructure. I opened a different map app, zoomed in to the same section of road. No bridge on that one either. I turned around and drove back north. I was looking for the bridge. The section of road was continuous. No bridge. I drove back and forth over what should have been the bridge section 3 times. The road was unbroken. No bridge deck sound. No guardrails. No concrete abutments. Just road. I pulled over and sat for a while. I was not tired. I'd had coffee at 2, and it was now 6. I am not medicated. I don't have any history of neurological episodes. I have excellent eyesight, and I've never had a hallucination before or since. I took a different route home that night, the long way around through Maryville. I called my father when I got home, not to tell him what happened, just to hear a familiar voice. He asked about my drive, and I told him I'd come down 129, and he said he hadn't been down 129 in years. Too many bad memories on that road, and I asked him what he meant. He said when I was small, maybe 4 or 5. Before the trip, I remembered at 7. He'd driven 129 in the dark, and he'd crossed a bridge that he couldn't find on his way back. And he'd looked for it, and never found it. And he'd never told anyone because it sounded too strange. I sat with the phone pressed to my ear and said nothing for a moment. "You've never mentioned that before," I said. "No," he said. We didn't say much after that. He asked how the weather was in Knoxville, and I told him fine, and we said goodnight. I've looked for documentation of that bridge. Old road records, county infrastructure maps, pre-digital survey data. I've talked to 2 people who drove that road regularly in the 1980s and 90s. One of them, an older man who worked for the county, looked at me for a long moment when I described where the bridge was, and then said he knew what I was talking about, and that he hadn't thought about it in years. I asked him if he knew where the bridge went. He looked at the wall for a moment. Then he said, "I think it's there when it needs to be there." I don't know what that means. I've thought about it many times. I've thought about my father's memory and my own, and the old man's strange answer. I think about the bridge when I'm driving. I think about it on ordinary roads in ordinary light, not just on mountain roads at night. I think about how roads go from place to place, and how crossing from one side to the other changes your position in the world. And I think about a bridge that isn't on any map. Sometimes, on a long drive, I watch the road ahead very carefully, watching for old concrete guardrails, watching for the hollow sound of a bridge deck under tires, watching for a crossing that shouldn't be there. I'm not sure if I'm watching because I want to find it again, or because I'm afraid I will. 25 stories. 25 ordinary people who drove a road through the mountains and came back changed. Not every one of them can tell you exactly what happened. Not every one of them wants to. Some of them have spent the years since looking for explanations, lining up the logical possibilities, testing them against what they remember. Some of them have stopped trying. Route 129 is still there. The curves are still there. The fog still collects in the valleys when the temperature drops and the sky is clear. And the forest still comes right up to the edge of the road, and the guardrails still show the dents where other stories ended. People drive the Dragon every single day. Most of them come through fine. Most of them are thinking about the curves and the speed and the scenery, and they're not thinking about the pullouts or the overlooks or the old bridge that doesn't show up on any map. But some of them come through the southern end with something they didn't have before. An unease that doesn't quite leave. A habit of checking mirrors more carefully. A reluctance to drive that particular section at night. That's the thing about roads like that. The road doesn't do anything to you. It just exists. 11 miles of asphalt in the mountains. 318 curves, guardrails and gravel shoulders, and fog. But the mountains are very old, and the forest is very dark. And whatever you bring onto that road, whatever you're carrying when you cross into those 11 miles, sometimes it comes back different on the other side. Drive safe out there.